Let's talk about engineer boots. I've got two pairs. They're actually standing right in front of my face right now. But these are two of the most well-regarded engineer boots from two of the most well-regarded engineer boot makers, at least that I know of.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids.
This is the Clinch engineer boot from Brass Tokyo, and this is the Roll Club engineer boot from Brian the Bootmaker. I got my first pair, which was this, back in October, and then I got my second pair shortly thereafter in January. This video is really intended to serve a purpose that I was seeking when I was looking for my first pair of engineer boots, and I just couldn't find the resource for these two pairs of engineer boots. But there are a lot of reviews, a lot of information, blogs, videos about this boot and boots very similar to this, but nothing really side by side that talks about the quality of life, the practicality, the functional aspects of these different boots, what it's like to own them and what it's like to wear them. The Clinch engineer boot from Brass Tokyo, this is a boot that retails for about $2,000 US. This is an 11-inch engineer boot in a brown overdyed horsebutt leather from a European tannery. That's all that it says, or at least that's all I was able to find about this leather. This is on their classic narrow last. You'll see this listed as the CN last. It's kind of got a woodsman-esque heel on the back. Maybe it is a woodsman heel, to be honest. Like I said, I'm not an expert in this area, but this is definitely one of those classic aesthetics and one of the best versions of it, if I say so myself. This is the Roll Club engineer boot. I've had this since January, and I got it directly from Brian the Bootmaker. This retails for $2,045 plus shipping. This is in a brown Italian horsebutt leather. This is on the RC 1945 last. It's got a very distinct set of characteristics and silhouettes. I would say a little less classic than this, but just very iconic for what engineer boots are today. But before I go further, I'll get into kind of the style and my personal preferences in a little bit. Just like the Clinch boot, this is 100% handmade. It's essentially saying there are no machines or mass-produced techniques in making this boot. I'm going to get into all the normal stuff here that you're going to probably have questions about. The sizing, the fit, the quality of the materials, the quality of the construction, the overall components that are used, as well as what my opinion is on kind of the styling of wearing this pair versus the styling of being able to wear that pair. Ultimately, I'm going to boil this down to, if I could only buy one pair, which one would I buy, and why is that the case? All right, so let's talk about sizing and fit. This is a 10.5 Clinch, which equates to a 9.5 US. One quick note here is I see a lot of reviews out there that say like I'm a 10.5 US Brannock and I got an 11 Clinch. An 11 Clinch is actually a 10 US. So that means they sized down a half, but in their review they said that they sized up a half. I think they misunderstood how the Clinch sizing system works. The Clinch size is just their standardization for their brand, but the US size, which they always have listed on the box, is the US size, which would equate to a US Brannock size, even though we all know the Brannock is not a perfect method for getting that exact size. It's a starting point, but I'll get off my soapbox here. Either way, don't get confused and try to size up a half thinking that you're actually getting a larger shoe because you're going to be getting a smaller shoe. Find what the US size that's listed on the boot or listed on the box for the boot and use that as the guide to figure out which pair of boots is right for you. Always reach out to the retailer with questions. The Roll Club is a 28E. Again, without getting into the kind of the mechanism of the sizing here, my understanding is just 28 is representative of the length in centimeters. E is the width. D is standard. E is one above that. Now that we kind of have an idea of what size these are, my true to size-ish fit is a UK 7.5 standard width. If you need to equate that to a US size, you would just add one. So a UK 7.5 is a US 8.5D. From a fit perspective, both of these fit extremely well, although quite different. I would say the Clinch boot, even though when you look at it, it's definitely got a longer toe, and it has just an overall like bigger footprint. No pun intended, but very well done by me. So even though the engineer boot from Clinch is overall bigger, it actually is a much snugger fit than the pair from Roll Club. The main parts of the boot that are snugger are in the width and in the vamp. Even though overall the boot fits very comfortably, I've never had any discomfort from wearing it. Actually, quite the opposite. It's always been extremely comfortable to wear. For the Roll Club, it definitely has a bit more overall like volume and a little bit of room in the width. But my foot doesn't move at all. My heel doesn't have any heel slippage. My foot doesn't come out of the boot when I'm walking in it. It just has a different overall silhouette, aesthetic, and anatomical shape to it. And despite that, and despite them being quite unique from each other when it comes to that fit experience for my foot, I really enjoy wearing both of them. Again, even though both of them are quite different wearing experiences. The one thing that you are going to notice, at least I have, is the height of the engineer boot. The Roll Club is a 9-inch engineer boot. The Clinch is an 11-inch. I believe you can get them in either one, but these are just the ones that I have. So you'll definitely notice that height difference. The other thing that you're going to notice is the Roll Club is a bit more generous in the shaft of the boot. It's got a lot more volume in it, and I don't feel this shaft actually like hugging the calf of my foot or my leg, depending on where the calf is. The engineer boot from Clinch, I definitely feel this all the way up my ankle into my calf. It's not an uncomfortable feeling, but I know that it's there. Whereas this, after a while, it kind of disappears and I don't even feel it or notice that it's there. Now, the quality of the materials, it's going to be pretty fast here. Both very high quality materials. The thing with like horse butt leather is it does almost have a shell cordovan-ish wear experience where it has rolls. You are going to see some of the creasing in there, but that's kind of besides the point here. It's just that you can tell that this is a substantial horse butt leather, and we all know part of the horse butt is the shell. I'm not a scientist or a leather worker, but just by feeling the firmness that's inside of this horse butt leather, it almost feels like the shell cordovan or the layer of shell is still in this leather. Moving over to the Roll Club, I'm going to echo very much the same thing. This is a very nice horse butt leather. You can see it's got a very tight grain structure on it, and you can also notice just from the kind of clips of me wearing these, as well as just looking at it here. Again, it's got that same characteristic of the leather rolling. Instead of having like those sharp creases, it's just a very substantial leather. And just by looking at it, kind of, it's got a nice firm grip to it. And I think that really is what you should be expecting when you're getting a horse butt leather. I wouldn't be worried about the quality of materials or the quality of construction when it comes to either of these boot makers. It's really going to be top notch, exactly what you expect for at a price point of over $2,000. The Clinch is definitely like that more like traditional, just very subtle, but just impeccable in the details. It doesn't have a lot of like thick, triple, quadruple, natural contrast stitching. It's got very like tonal stitching, nothing that's going to like overly stand out. It's just going to be a very refined and elegant engineer boot. Looking at the Roll Club, I think it's quite the opposite when we talk about contrast stitching. You got the quadruple stitching here around the heel counter, triple stitching almost everywhere else. You've got a very high contrast kind of top line going on here around the top of the engineer boot. Contrast stitching on the outsole. You've got Brian's signature rubber sole and heel here. It's definitely a much more just like quintessential like Roll Club Americana type thing. Whereas the Clinch boot, I would say, is very much like the Japanese, like just perfection and craftsmanship. That said, like I also think that this is equally on par in craftsmanship and finishing. You can just see the Roll Club's got a bit more, it's got some curves to it. One of the things that I definitely have noticed, and which I do actually prefer in the Roll Club, is just where this buckle or where this strap kind of is anchored and then the angle that it's at. It just gives it a little more shape and a little more like definition in the boot, as well as kind of having this like pop out here at the calf. As you can see, like right here, that is a very intentional curve, whereas the Clinch is much more, straight up and down. You couldn't go wrong either way. I love how they both have kind of a signature detail on the shaft of the boot. You have the Roll Club emblem right here, or the toe track that's going right down the center of the boot. This is something that, it was really like just a byproduct of boot making, over the last century. And it's something that he just really thought resonated with him. So he kind of accentuated that during the boot making process to make it a kind of a signature detail in his boot. These are things that you're not going to be left wanting no matter what boot you go with. There are some noticeable differences though. For the Clinch sizing, even though I was able to figure it out and understand it, clearly not everyone has or everyone does. And because of that, there's definitely that risk. You don't want to spend $2,000 on a pair of boots, get them in the mail, and realize you just can't wear them. Besides that, it really just boils down to like what aesthetic you like better. There's no clear standout winner. There's no clear advantage of going with one maker over the other. It's more like, what are your personal limitations about what type of setting you want to wear it in? Do you need something a little more reserved? Do you need something a little more accommodating in the fit? Or do you just really fall in love with the aesthetic and kind of the signature look of one versus the other? For me, it's the Roll Club. I've always wanted a pair of Roll Club engineer boots, and when I say always, like the last couple of years. But the very distinct aesthetic that Brian creates, the much more like kind of curvy lines in the silhouette, it's just a bit different. And even though this is that like perfect engineer boot in every single way, when I think of what the pinnacle of engineer boots is for me, it's something that has a bit more character to it. And I think this pair from Brian kind of hits that nail right on the head. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully it'll help somebody make the same decision that I had to make back in October. And then I just went ahead and just got them both anyway, because that's kind of what we do. If you want to check out the Shelvage podcast, the episode with Brian the Bootmaker, I'll put that link right up there. And if you want to check out the unboxing of either of these pairs, I'll put those links in the description. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks for sticking around. I'll see you soon.
Might as well just ride around the nursery and